Can I get the little gentleman to come back up? Thank you. Chalice lighting. Our theme for the month is expectations. And it's been a summer of expectations for me. Some of you have gone to Camp Unistar. I was asked by a colleague at Blandon Foundation to come up to Camp Unistar and share some information on race and racism. I have to tell you, thank you, sir, I didn't want to go. The idea of a lone black man going up in northern Minnesota with a whole lot of trees around and not knowing anybody, I didn't want to go. But I was very fortunate. I have folks here in this church who have gone, and some of you have definitely gone. But there's a gentleman in the audience that helped to start Camp Unistar, and that's Dr. Don Layton. So I thought, well, first of all, before I decide to go up there, I'll see if I can get Don to go. And he went. And I said, I need some more support, so I asked Ray Phelps Bowman to come up with me because he led a study here at the church and the community back in 2005 or so, where we looked at a video called Race, the Power of an Illusion, which says that there is no biological or scientific evidence to support the theory of race, that race is really a recent invention, and it was created to provide a huge economic advantage of one group over another. There is only one race, and that's the human race. So I went up to Camp Unistar with two supporters and our wives, and we had a wonderful time. We talked to folks about the issue of race. We did a training. We looked at what creates violence. We looked at something called a pyramid of hate. And up there at the camp, we actually created a pyramid of love because of support from you folks. So I will tell you, if you have an opportunity to go to Camp Unistar, it's a wonderful place to take your family and to have a wonderful time while you look at some things that are critical as well. So I just want to put in a vote of, I want to say everything positive about Camp Unistar, please, if you have an opportunity to go. So our camp lighting, or our chalice lighting, comes from a vision for Unitarian Universalism in the multicultural world. When humility and courage born of our history, or with the humility and courage born of our history, we are called as Unitarian Universalists to build the beloved community where all souls are welcome as blessings, and the human family lives whole and reconciled. With this vision in our hearts and our minds, we light our chalice, and I thank the young gentleman for helping me out. Two readings, one from Greta Thunberg, Swedish teenage climate activist that you saw earlier, speaking last week at the United Nations Climate Change Summit in New York. Greta says, "My message is this: we'll be watching you. This is all wrong. I shouldn't even be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to young people for hope. How dare you? You've stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We're in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying you're doing enough. And the politics and the solutions needed are nowhere in sight. You say you hear us and you understand the urgency, but no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and kept on failing to act, then you would be evil. And I refuse to believe that. How dare you pretend that this can be solved with just business as usual and some technical solutions? There will not be any solutions or plans presented in line with the real figures because these numbers are too uncomfortable. And you're still not mature enough to tell it like it is. You're failing us, but the young people are starting to understand your betrayal. The eyes of all future generations are upon you. And if you choose to fail us, I say, we will never forget you. And I will not let you get away with this. We will not let you get away with this. Right now, right here, is where we draw the line. The world is waking up, and change is coming whether you like it or not. Fantastic. Now a reading from the Hebrew Bible, the book of Genesis, the first chapter. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. And then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day. So God made a dome that separated the waters. God called the dome sky. And there was evening and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear." God called the dry land earth. And then the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God said that was good. And God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seeds, and fruit trees of every kind on earth." And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night." God made the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser night to rule the night and the stars. And God said that was good. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things, and wild animals of the earth of every kind." And God said it was good. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, according to our likeness." God said everything that God had made. God saw everything that God had made, and indeed it was very good.
I can still remember the terrain, the way the path made a curve just past the shelter on the south side, the droppings of geese adorning the whole way, how the well-worn dirt there had a softness to it, but also a ruggedness with roots as if they were quietly sneaking up through the dirt, barely inching their way to the surface. Once we were off the pavement and into the dirt, there it was like some magical portal, just through some overgrown weeds and some low-hanging branches, leading to what really was just a thin strip of woods, but to us was an expanse of magic, of tree canopy-covered wilderness and wildness right in the middle of town. We spent hours upon hours there, days upon days in those small woods in the park near my home. Not quite as much time as we spent at the swimming pool at that same park, but close. In those woods, whole worlds were created. We took on different identities and realities. We played games and told stories that brought us into places and times far beyond the mid-1990s in North Mankato. And those few familiar stumps and those hollowed out trunks and new saplings and squirrels and birds nestled between the small spring lake on one side and the baseball fields on the other, and just behind us, the consistent traffic on Lake Avenue just a few yards away. There where childhood took root, with the only interaction with the outside world being the occasional and unintentional startling of passerbys along the path when they heard the echoes, sometimes shouts of our imagination, drifting down from the trees through the leaves. These trees seemed to shelter us. They held us. They gave us a gift and a place where we felt in so many ways resting in the grace of the world, and we felt free. It was our Eden, at least during the summer and after school on nice days. It would be years before I learned of the work of Rachel Carson in Silent Spring, or read the book Last Child in the Woods, or the epidemic of people getting connected with the World Wide Web and screens at the ready a bit too much, and at the same time losing connection with the wild and natural beauty of the earth and the landscape, not to mention the connection of human to human, of human to plant and animal right around us. It would be years before I would understand or even fear ecological devastation and begin to become somewhat fluent in phrases like topsoil depletion and carbon emissions and global climate catastrophe. This is all wrong, said modern prophet and poet Greta. I should be back at school on the other side of the ocean. You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. How dare you? I, growing up, was never one to go hiking too much or real camping outside of that strip of woods, other than with a Coleman stove and an air mattress, also known as glamping or glamorous camping. You might be familiar. But there was a beautiful simplicity still in my childhood when all the toys inside didn't captivate my imagination anymore, and there seemed to be nothing left to do, and I was gifted the beauty of boredom. It's a thing so seldom in our world today. Nothing left to do, so then the backyard and the park just a few blocks away were like magic to me, and were like home. And I also grew up with a spiritual framework that celebrated the natural world, parables and stories about the beauty of the earth, starting in Genesis, where over and over again, as you heard from George, the literal words say that it was good. It was good, and it was very good, sacred earth. And this text from Genesis was hijacked by centuries of corruption and greed. They became snarled and manipulated into false understandings. In the first chapter, there's an old word interpreted dominion, that humans would have dominion over the earth. And that was picked up by empires and then used to justify environmental exploitation and degradation. However, like any ancient text, there is more to the story. Genesis itself offers two creation accounts. Many of you may know this. The first one includes that word dominion, which in and of itself has more than one meaning. In the Hebrew, the core one relates to responsibility and benevolent care, not dominion or power. Benevolent care, and the impact, being mindful of the impact that humanity has on the rest of the world. And then in the second creation account, just a few words later in chapter 2, where humanity is made out of the dust of the earth, uses a Hebrew word abad, which means to cultivate, or more literally, to serve. I was reminded of that this week as I pulled all these scripture commentaries down from my shelf and looked at this word abad, which indicates servitude of humanity to the earth. It's used throughout the Bible, indicating servitude from servants to leaders, even people to God. So in this framework, Genesis itself, 3,000 years ago, sets up that humanity is servant to the earth, not the other way around. But a lot of the world, at least those with significant power, have gotten that flipped the wrong way for a long, long time. Poet George L. Lyon writes it in this way, almost as a reflective rewrite of the language of Genesis and Eden in modern language. In her poem called Inventing Sin, she writes, God signs to us, but we cannot understand. She shouts and we take cover. Our schedules we moan. Our loved ones we cry. But God is fed up. All the oceans she gave us, all the fields, all the acres of steep, seedful forests. And what did we do? We invented the great chain of being and the chainsaw and sin. God sees us now gorging ourselves and starving our neighbors, or starving ourselves and storing our own grain. And she says, I've had it. You cast your trash upon the waters, and it's rolling in. You stuck your fine finger into the mystery of life and to find death, and you did. And you learned how to end the world in nothing flat. And now you come crying to your mommy, send us a miracle, prove that you exist. Just look at your hand, God says. Listen to your sacred heart. Do you have to haul the tide in, or do you have to sweeten the berries on the vine? I set you down a miracle among miracles, and you want more? It's your turn. You show me. You show me, she writes. Ouch. And true, and reflective, and hard to know how to hold this rewrite other than a despairing sigh. Because we know there are other stories than the one of domination and exploitation. There have always been other stories, and sometimes when we dig deeper beyond the surface of what seems like ancient obliteration of care for the earth, we know there are countless stories that have always reminded humanity that the earth, the world is sacred. Stories from pagan and Wicca traditions predating Genesis by centuries, and stories and practices and beliefs of indigenous people spanning centuries and continents. And there are stories right now in the face of impending doom and the real crisis of this planet of resilience and hope and life, refusing to believe in the evil that seems to be in power. Because hope is the thing with feathers. Delicate, beautiful, that perches in the soul, as Emily Dickinson writes, and sings the tune without words and never stops at all, that in the gale is heard. Jeez, we are in a gale, aren't we? A harsh and dangerous storm. And there is yet a persistent song that is heard and echoes out of the trees where imagination and wonder and connection to the earth take root, out of experiences of wonder and beauty and resistance and resilience that take to the woods and take to the streets and take to the halls of power and says, straight in power's face, how dare you? Because we believe the beauty of this world is too much to let it go. Like in these words I've shared before from Buff Whitman Bradley, maybe you recognize, that we often feel in our social justice work. He writes, at the strategy meeting to invert the established order, coffee and cookies will be served. In attendance are a dozen or so persons who do not need a weatherman to tell us that something is horribly wrong. And after much discussion, we fashion an excellent plan for an action of virtually no significance that will likely go completely unnoticed by the general public and have no effect on the powers and principalities. Will sit blocking the entrances to some ponderous edifice until after a couple of hours the police will cart us away and all will return to what has been called normal. However, he writes, there is a method in our insignificance. Because we know deep in the origami folds of ancient memory that for thousands of years, ordinary people whose identities have evaporated like dew from the morning grass have been committing acts of resistance that are now unremembered. And we know that those seemingly ephemeral actions do not vanish, but they accumulate in a growing mass, each fraction of a gram added to the bulk of all the others, until the day finally comes when the weight is great enough to flip the world, and none of us can say for certain that tomorrow will not be that day. None of us can say for certain that tomorrow will not be that day. 1 year ago, Greta was sitting alone in Sweden. This image is captivating to me. 1 year ago. Last week and still now, millions worldwide have joined her because they have a voice, and more than that, a presence of persistence and prophetic power in these teenage climate activists, because it's not only Greta, there are many. Like teenage climate activist Artemisia Zacarabaia, a 16-year-old from the indigenous community in Brazil. She spoke in New York before Greta spoke, of fighting for Mother Earth because, quote, "this is the mother of all our fights for life." Or Autumn Peltier, 14-year-old activist appointed Chief Water Commissioner for the Anishinaabe Nation and was just nominated for the International Children's Peace Prize. Or Isra Hersey, 16-year-old co-founder of the U.S. Youth Climate Strike and the daughter of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Or Zutazit Katel Martinez, an 18-year-old Earth Guardians youth director, an indigenous climate activist, hip-hop artist, and a powerful voice on the front lines for the globally youth-led environmental movement. Sometimes hope is something that lives deep down in our collective humanity, in the origami folds of our ancient memory that springs up all over the place. And what a time to pay attention to leaders who might have been unlikely leaders. What a time to offer whatever we can to keep some song of hope alive. For them, for us, sometimes it feels like the world is on the brink of complete disaster. And in many ways it is, and in many ways that has arrived. Activist Rachel Taylor holds this complexity of climate crisis and everyday tasks, writing, "The real secret of the apocalypse is not that it comes with a bang or a whimper, but that it happens while you're doing other things. Taking the kids to school, paying the bills, going to see your friends play, all the stuff of normal life happens until it doesn't, maybe for you. But still it does for your neighbor who has to do the laundry and schlep his mom to the grocery store. So you keep trying to go on, taking care of the things that are still working, while at the same time trying to fight injustice and stop genocide. You do what you can. And some days it's just surviving," she says. "Other days you put your body between the machine and those more vulnerable than you. But you can't do that every day, at least until we all have to. The secret is that you don't get a break from building a better world. You have to do it while still surviving in this one. You have to do it because it's exciting and dangerous and subversive and necessary," she says. "And you still have to do the dishes." Isn't that the truth? Filled with that both and. So many truths at once. Beauty and brokenness woven together like thread that is too fine to be pulled apart, because that's what life is made of. Beauty and brokenness back and forth, round and round, again and again. Sometimes it's important to realize and expect that it won't all just work out okay. It won't in this life. It's going to be complicated, and it's going to be hard. Some days more than others, some lives more than others, and our ethics will wrestle with our choices and our convenience, living complicated lives in this miracle among miracles of a world. And sometimes you're going to feel alone or depleted, like a song of hope has gone all but silent. But as much as we can expect the worst, we can also expect that there will be people who rise and lead. And sometimes millions will join in. Sometimes just one heart will change. And we can expect that there are things we can do, small though they are, which are often the very things that keep accumulating to flip the world. I leave you with these words from my colleague and friend, the Reverend Molly Hausch Gordon, who gives these suggestions of how to survive the end of the world. She says, "Get to know your neighbors, feed them, let them feed you. Watch each other's kids, grandkids, and pets. Develop the muscle of generosity like you are training for an ultra-marathon of giving. Share everything you can with anyone who asks, and ask for what you need to. Tell the truth to yourself first. Sit at the feet of your most vulnerable neighbors and your most vulnerable places. They have the most to teach you about survival so listen. Remember your ancestors and the things they survived. Find the resilience that is your birthright and the courage that made way for your life. Practice taking risks. Show up in every struggle when someone's dignity is on the line, because that's the only way we survive. Learn about reparations and native sovereignty. Double down on exercising supremacy from your soul. Learn to be tender. Refuse to be hardened, and let your heart be moved every damn time. Root in the place you are and learn its history, learn its geography, learn its seasons, and then sing and dance a lot. Make art and love and rest luxuriously and eat some pie. May we rest in the grace and the beauty of this earth each moment, to sustain us for all the hard work we do together. Right, as you're comfortable to join a hand next to you or place your hand over your heart and breathe deep the breath of life. We sing praises to the source of all life, ancient histories and stories and cultures and traditions that have reminded us the earth is sacred. And we sing praises to these gilded saints for their wisdom and for their courage. Amen.